Hello and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Audrey Lewis, Marketing Specialist at Telium, and I'll be your moderator. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a couple of housekeeping items. This webinar will last approximately 45 minutes and will be recorded. The slides and recording will be available to you at the end of the session. There are some related resources in the attachment section as well that you can engage with at any time. We also want to hear your questions, so please use the Q&A feature to submit them. For any questions that we aren't able to answer live, we'll follow up with you after. And now for today's speaker. Jake Spencer is a product marketing manager at Telium. Jake has spent the majority of his career working for enterprise technology brands in all aspects of branding, digital marketing, and web analytics. All right, let's get started. Jake, over to you.
All right, thank you, Audrey. Well, welcome and thanks for spending some of your morning with us. I'm going to bring up some slides here. We are going to go through some slides. That's the easiest way for us to kind of walk through all of these CDP use cases that we're excited to share with you today. But once the Q&A portion starts, I will jump back on and answer some questions as we go. So let me bring up the first slide here. Again, welcome to today's webinar. We're really excited that you have chosen to spend some of your morning with us, some of your afternoon, your evening. We want to make sure that everybody walks away today with a better understanding of how to understand your customers through data, some use cases that customer data platforms solve for, and how to approach getting those use cases set up. If you're in the market for a CDP and you're kind of wondering, hey, exactly where should I be getting started? We've got some suggestions for you there as well. You can find a lot of this content, and we'll point you to it at the end of the webinar, in our definitive guide to CDPs. The definitive guide is a 72-page monumental asset of everything that you need to know about customer data platforms. We'll have links and where you can go get that at the end of the webinar. And that is going to talk about a lot of the use cases that we go through today. So Audrey gave you a quick introduction to myself. My name is Jake Spencer. I am a product marketing manager here at Telium. Prior to Telium, I was a digital marketer and I was a web analyst. And so I was going through and placing tags on pages, measuring campaigns, going through and actually utilizing a lot of the use cases that you'll go through today for various different enterprise B2B SaaS brands. And so I've been in there, I've done the work to get tags set up, to get data flowing into systems, to get marketing campaigns out the door that are data driven. So I'm excited to kind of go through and talk about something I love with you guys today. So here's the quick agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about the market environment, some interesting things that we're seeing when we talk with partners and when we talk with our customers about some of the pressures and changes in the way that we go about understanding and getting data about our customers, and then utilizing that data first and foremost with consent in a first-party manner, and to ultimately optimize customer experience. We'll then walk through just really quickly some of the basics of a CDP. If you are looking for a little bit of a deeper dive onto the technology in and of itself, we did have a webinar previously with my colleague, Mac Parisi. He talked specifically kind of about the technology aspect of a CDP, basic concepts, what it does. And so I'd encourage you to go watch that webinar, which covers chapter 1 of our definitive guide. And then finally, we're going to go into our use cases, and we'll approach this from a crawl, walk, and run standpoint, which is kind of when we see our successful customers really get the most out of their CDP investment, they take this approach, right? Where can I go get easy wins? Where can I build on top of those easy wins? And then when can I really start to build this enterprise-wide data strategy that's touching more than just marketing, but my analytics teams, my developers, my customer service and support channels. We'll talk about all of that today as well. So that's what the next 30 or so, 35 or so minutes looks like. Please get your questions in. We will have Q&A at the end, and I'm happy to answer as many questions as I can or point you to somebody who can internally here at Telium. So let's talk about some interesting changes going on with customer data strategy, I think especially going into next year. If we're talking to the marketing team, we're really seeing marketers needing to do a lot more with a lot less. And what's that mean? It's been an interesting year, I think, industry-wide with how either business has accelerated or maybe unfortunately decelerated, and marketers have had just a lot of change to deal with. And so oftentimes that change for marketers and customer experience that group has been tasked with getting more out of a stagnant or even declining budget. Gartner has kind of seen that marketing budgets into next year is either going to be stagnant or slightly declining. And so how do you go through and with less budget, make more happen for the business? It's an interesting question and something that obviously technology and tools can help optimize as you go into planning for next year. Another interesting thing that we see is the customer journey that marketers try and understand and analytics professionals try and understand is often very fragmented. The growth of mobile, social, IoT devices, and more have created opportunities for businesses to tap into customer data, but more difficulty in creating personalized experiences across all of those channels, right? It's an amazing time to go through and understand and listen to your customers and the ways that they're engaging with your brand, but then taking that data and building experiences across those same channels is quite difficult. Third one that we're seeing is that personalization, prediction, and privacy are three pillars that are going to continue to be top of mind for customers and how they engage with brands and how they expect brands to engage with them. All three of those are a little tough to do, right? It's not an easy task to ensure that privacy preferences are understood and met. It's not an easy task to make sure that experiences are personalized across channels. It's not an easy task to leverage machine learning and predictive insights to be able to anticipate customer needs for your business. But that is the expectation and the bar that's been set. And so how do we balance all of that? Again, a really interesting challenge for marketers going into next year. And then last but not least, digital transformation acceleration. The world has shifted to a mandate for digital first customer experiences. And as more customers have shifted and made digital their go-to means of purchase engagement, digital transformation has also accelerated. I want to touch on that a little bit because I think in the context of today's webinar, we're talking about creating and acquiring customers. That digital transformation, that digital first mandate, I think has shifted shifted kind of how a lot of businesses go about getting their customer experience efforts and customer acquisition efforts off the ground. We are going to point to some data here from McKinsey. They did a report called The Quickening. And this is essentially looking at the US e-commerce penetration from 2009 to 2019 and that steady kind of acceleration. And then we looked for the beginning of the quarter this year when the pandemic first started and digital first was a mandate because in-person experiences and in-person shopping was greatly limited due to health and safety reasons. We saw about a 10 years growth in 3 months. Just an amazing shift and upheaval of kind of the way that brands used to go through and interact with consumers and go acquire consumers now to making sure that that was a digital first experience. And within that, what was also interesting is that those patterns and behaviors that consumers adopted over that shift into digital first customer experiences, ordering online, picking up, in the parking lot, doing curbside delivery, whatever that might be, consumers went through and tried out new brands for the first time. And there's some interesting data here. If you look at this, it says 75% of US consumers have tried different stores, websites, or brands during the COVID-19 crisis. And then 60% of those consumers that McKinsey surveyed in this Quickening survey said that they expect to integrate those new brands and stores into their post-COVID-19 lives. And so very interesting shift in how consumers go through and buy, purchase, engage, and ultimately there's brand loyalty up for grabs. We have had a little bit of the card and the deck that's been shuffled up a little bit. And so those brands that can really think about, how do I provide a best-in-class digital experience around this shift? There is some brand loyalty up for grabs in this shift in how we acquire customers. But ultimately, at the end of the day, some interesting data for Braze, and then we'll kind of close here on the industry portion. Human connection still powers consumer relationships, right? Even though we can't have that one-to-one interaction with consumers in our stores, in our restaurants, environments, whatever that might be, people still buy from people. Consumers still want to have a personalized human experience, and they're a lot more likely to stick around and be a customer for life when they receive that. So the challenge for brands now is to figure out, how do I make that human experience come through to life in my web properties and my digital interactions and touch points? Some interesting data here from our friends at Braze. 1.6% of their consumers surveyed, or 1.6 times, let me start over. The consumers that they studied said that they were 1.6 times more likely to say that they love a brand if they felt that they had a human connection, a personalized connection with them. Said that they were 1.9 times more likely to be satisfied with that brand, 1.7 times more likely to purchase from that brand, and 1.7 times more likely to recommend that brand that they felt provided them a very human experience. And ultimately, loyalty, lifetime value, customers that are going to continue to come back. And so that's the challenge. We've shifted into a world that is very digitally driven and digital first, and consumers are starting to adopt those habits and keep them post-COVID, right? Whenever we might be able to go back and safely go through and do a lot of our retail shopping, safely go through and go back into in-store experiences or in-person experiences, digital is still going to be an adopted behavior due to the fact that we've all needed to kind of move that way this year. So how do we create a human connection? How do we go through and ensure that our digital experiences are kind of where they need to be? So what's the way forward? How do we start to figure this problem out? I think the big thing that we want to touch on here is that to innovate today, you really need to start to understand your customer through data, and not just a single kind of source. Web data is not going to be enough. Getting data off of a mobile device and understanding how customers are leveraging applications isn't enough. It's really important to have one-to-one conversations with your customers, and that's a need in order to stay relevant. And the way that you start to understand what conversation you should be having with your customers is now ultimately through data. And that data needs to be approached in a very unified fashion. There's many, many different ways and many different tools and technologies that brands are leveraging today to understand their customers, and all of them have a piece of the picture, right? My marketing cloud, my DMP, my personalization engine, my website, my CRM, they might all see pieces of my customer, but until I can kind of unify that experience and understand all of my customers' engagement habits and preferences across a multitude of different ways that I have available to me to engage that customer, brick and mortar, mobile app, social, display, call center, I'm really not going to have a full picture of how I should be having conversations with this customer. I might get lucky. I might pick and choose very well due to my personalization engine being good, but I might not have the most optimal customer experience because I'm missing engagement points on mobile apps. I'm missing engagement points from my website. I'm not bringing all of that data together into a comprehensive and unified approach to customer data. So that's really what we mean by understanding your customer through data. This is kind of the visual view of what that looks like. And you heard from Matt last webinar about customer data platforms and how that helps start to solve some of that unified. It's not easy to get to that slide that I just showed a minute ago, right? This is obviously an ideal state, but it's not easy always to get there without the proper tool and approach. And that's really in what Matt talked about last webinar, really where CDPs have come in. CDP is a software system that helps present a unified, persistent, and updated view of an individual customer based on data from interactions across multiple channels, platforms, and devices. That's how we start to approach and get back to where I had that slide previously on understanding my customer across multiple different touch points. That's what CDPs were purpose-built to do. It is also purpose-built to collect data from a wide range of sources. CDPs unify customer data to create and form a comprehensive view of the customer across devices and channels, and then make that data available to other systems. CDPs improve your organizations, better your customer relationships, and complement your current software and marketing efforts. And so imagine, again, pulling in data from all sources that your customer might be engaging with your brand on, building that unified customer profile, and then having all of the engagement and execution tools and technologies. Think about personalization tools, analytics tools, advertising, CRM systems, being able to work off the same set of customer data that has come from across any sort of touch point that you find valuable. So that's where CDPs start to fit in and start to help us execute and bring about better experiences based on data due to some of the shifts that we've seen. If you go back to some of the slides that I went over in the beginning, how do marketers make sure that they get more done with less in CX professionals? Well, if I know, a customer is going through and has already made a purchase, that's a customer that I should probably be suppressing from advertising about that same offer, that same item, whatever that might be. I want to be efficient with my marketing spend. I want data to be able to do that. Customers expect personalized experiences. Again, if I'm not understanding my customer across the full life cycle of the ways that they're engaging with my brand, I'm likely going to get lucky sometimes, right, where I provide an excellent experience, but it's not going to be consistent, and it's not going to be across all of the channels that I have available to engage my customer with. Those are just a few small examples of kind of the ways that CDPs start to approach and solve some of those issues. So I'm thinking about a CDP, right? Let's say that. Where do I get started, right? You've got me, I'm interested. Where do I start to get started with a CDP and kind of, let's say I bring one in, where do I start? Because the outcomes are not always, well-defined, and so it can be some use case ideas. That's really what we're going to do for the majority of the rest of the webinar here. So in chapter 2 of our ebook, we look at a crawl, walk, and run approach. And so really when we talk with our customers, we want to define how they can get to CDP success. You've made an investment in software. We've talked about the good outcomes that can come from a unified and single view of the customer. How do I get there? There's really 4 stages that we focus on. First is adoption. This is stage 1, where you're defining and integrating data sources. You're building out data quality specs. Bad data is going into your CDP. Let me tell you, bad results will come out of it. So we want to make sure that quality data is going into our CDP, data that we trust. Defining core use cases, attributes, and audiences. Some of those use cases we'll talk about today, and the audience creation we'll talk about today. And defining privacy and consent data. And that's a big one. How do I make sure that I'm not only collecting preferences, whether that's from a consent management platform or Telium has a built-in consent tool to our tag management system, but also ensuring that those preferences, if I'm going to send data through a system and out to my tools and technologies, that those are executed and acted upon. The second is growth. So automating some actions, right? Taking some work off the marketers, analytics, and CX professionals' use plates. Looking at automating some actions, using audiences for core use cases, expanding the data sources. So maybe, in that growth or the adoption phase, I just want to start with web and mobile data. I want to get data off of my website. I want to get data off of my mobile app, and that's okay. I've got some omni-channel data that I might have available to me. I've got some other data sources that I'm just not quite using yet, maybe a point of sale system. That's okay. So maybe in stage 2, we're looking at some more growth and we expand those use cases. Add file upload and point of sale data sources, what I just mentioned. Maybe go through and saying, instead of just executing on a car email abandonment use case that we talked about in the adoption phase, I'm going to expand out to my email system, analytics, and other tools and technologies that I want to make sure has customer data. Then we move into optimization. This is kind of your third phase here, when we start to increase the customer data supply chain visibility, create a more comprehensive view of the customer, orchestrate data across the customer lifecycle, distribute regulatory compliance through the supply chain, and start to do things like anticipate customer behavior and take proactive actions with machine learning. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then finally, expansion, kind of scaling that out to the entire organization. Adding more data sources, automating fully with business rules of where you want data to go, what data quality should look like when data comes into the system, automating campaigns and actions, triggers for customer experiences, expand the use of machine learning insights, optimize the tech stack, and then finally focus on future-proofing your customer data. So that's usually the journey that we present to our customers on going from I bought a CDP to I'm getting maximum ROI out of my CDP. And so we'll talk about some of the use cases within each of these stages here. So let's start with some crawl use cases. First thing that we're going to do in this crawl stage when we're in adoption is talk about ways that I can optimize use cases that are probably already existing and going on. So cross-channel cart abandonment, typically that's a usual like retargeting campaign where you can go through and say, hey, somebody's shown up on my app, somebody's shown up on my website. I want to make sure if they haven't completed an action that I really want them to complete at some sort of conversion point, I go back and I re-engage them because they were showing strong signals, or they have gone through and, suppressed or gone through and done something that I think, that person is showing signals for actual conversion, but, I don't think that they're actually going to get there. And so maybe that's actually suppressing some of your audiences as well. So we're going to first talk about cross-channel cart abandonment campaign and what that looks like as a CDP use case. So here's what that looks like. And all of these, again, are in the chapter 2 of the CDP definitive guide. We start at the top here, and this is a common automation example for development teams using the Telium Customer Data Hub or our customer data platform to automate that cart abandonment action with the inclusion of in-store purchase data seen here. So if we look across the kind of sources of data that we have, what are we going to bring in to build our unified view of the customer? We're going to bring in web data, point of sale data, maybe data from my mobile app, and that's going to allow me to understand and build a profile, right? And so on the left here, we can see Kayla's profile, and I've got some things that I understand about Kayla. I understand maybe she's put some items in her cart on my web experience. I understand that she's got product favorites. Maybe that's coming from my mobile. And then I can go through and now start to build as I understand more and more customer behavior like Kayla's. I can go through and create unique profiles for better audience segmentation. So now I move that into the audience segmentation. I want to get all of my cart abandoners that I feel are, have product favorites. They have been purchasing in the past. These are cart abandoners that I want to go after because I think that they're likely to purchase again. That's an audience that I can create and then send that across my channels, whether that's an ad served in a platform like Facebook, an ad served in a platform like the Trade Desk, maybe an email sent from your survey or MailChimp system, or some sort of site personalization through a system like Optimizely. I can now orchestrate based on that audience, based off data that I got, orchestrate a more intelligent cross-channel audience cart abandonment campaign. I can engage them in multiple ways across multiple different tools and technologies. In the past, I've probably done some cart abandonment campaigns before, but this is obviously, a more intelligent approach, one that I can actually suppress. Maybe I've got some data saying that, I've got some profiles here that don't have product favorites, that have only visited me once. They aren't repeat purchasers. And so I'm going to suppress those because those might be window shoppers to me. They might not be somebody who's going to actually complete a cart abandonment campaign the way I want to. And so this is an easy use case. And when we're in that crawl phase, we want to start to identify use cases for our customers where they can go through, where the CDP can go through and actually make things that we're already doing today optimized. That's really where I see a lot of success come out of that crawl phase. So moving on to walk, once you've gotten your use cases down, you said, hey, I've gotten a couple of easy wins and ROI metrics out of my first couple of use cases and campaigns. And as a reminder, there's more crawl use cases in the chapter 2 book. That's just one. Maybe I'm ready to go through and start to walk now, add some data sources, add some complexity to the business rules that I have within my customer data platform. And let's talk about some walk campaigns. We'll talk about 2. First and foremost is lookalike audiences. And so, with limited data from third-party now, from third-party sources or third-party cookies, lookalike audiences and the way that we go through and build lookalike audiences is going to be difficult. But lookalike audiences is one of the most common use cases that I see in digital marketing in order to go through and find people who have purchased from me in the past and then have some sort of publisher or trade or advertising platform go find more people with similar behaviors. And so why do you start with lookalike audiences? Well, this use case is going to allow you to expand the scale of an acquisition program without having to rebuild each audience in every channel. And then also give you the ability to define attributes of best customers and use that data in advertising channels to obviously find new consumers in with similar attributes, and do that, leveraging your own first-party data. So let's jump into this use case here. So this is another way, obviously, to fuel customer acquisition programs through lookalike campaigns. This is a common use case that we leverage. So how does a CDP fit into that use case? Brands commonly want to use knowledge and data about their existing customers to target prospects that have similar characteristics, especially for a brand's best, your high-value customers. Lookalike audiences based on customer lists are a key way to scale revenue generation programs in a relevant way, and a key way to scale the value of customer data. Generating the best possible lift of existing users or customers, not a one-size-fits-all approach, as the basis for lookalike audiences is a valuable capability enabling you to construct large targeting groups to meet volume goals while still maintaining a lot of relevancy, being sure that the audiences that you're building in these lookalike audiences are relevant to your business. So first off, to know what data you want to collect, it's important to identify what group you want to use as your model for lookalikes. In this case, we'll need purchase data from any channel generating purchases. So again, if you look across our data sources, we're using the same ones that we set up in our first use case. We're still bringing in web data, still bringing in point of sale systems and mobile applications. You can also use non-customer groups depending on your strategy. For example, a media or content publisher, you might want to use interest categories to generate lookalike audiences to your customers who are interested in sports or business news, etc. So then all of that event data that we've been collecting for a little while, it needs to be organized around a customer to provide context. What should I actually be doing with this data? What should I actually be understanding about the customer from this data? So the individual purchase events from each channel can be added up into a lifetime value attribute. And that's what we're seeing when we look at Janet's profile that we're creating based on her interaction with our brand. We understand the lifetime value, maybe something like a loyalty level. Maybe we know that she owns a particular product. Those attributes can then be used on their own in combination to create audiences. And that's what you see in that middle portion of the diagram to the right. We're going to start to create audiences that either we suppress, those are audiences that we don't want to start to engage, that we think aren't going to be good lookalike audiences, and audiences that we want to actually go through and leverage to create lookalike audiences. And so, those product one VIPs, those are my highly engaged, high value customers that I want to then send to Facebook, Trade Desk, Google Ads, Salesforce to go through and say, hey, find me more customers like my product one VIPs. It's a very high scale way to go about and do that. And these audiences allow you to orchestrate that audience data to those venues, like we just mentioned, Facebook, Trade Desk, Google Ads, Salesforce, you name it. And so that's, again, another way in which I'm combining the data that I own on my own digital platforms, building it into a profile, creating unique audiences, suppressing those audiences sometimes. Again, back to that efficiency play that with marketers, I've got limited budget. I need to ensure that the lookalike audiences I'm building look like my best customers. So understanding, hey, I don't want discount shoppers in here, window shoppers, people who are just coming to my website and visiting for the first time, or just kind of casually browsing around. Those aren't going to do it for me. So I really want my product VIP audiences to go into these platforms so that they can go with their own proprietary data sets and find me prospects, customers that I can go advertise to that look like my best high value customers. All right, the other one when we talk about privacy is honoring consent. And so this is a big one. Privacy regulations like GDPR and CCPA make it necessary for your consumers to opt in and opt out of data collection. A CDP can help you manage consent data. So consent to us is another event, right? It is something that you've collected about your consumer that needs to be built into a profile to ensure that context is given to the consent, and to ensure that that profile, that consent preference can be adhered to. It's not a great privacy strategy if you have a cookie banner set up on your website, somebody opts out of analytics and personalization, yet you're still showing them analytics, or you're still collecting analytics and personalization data. That does not a good privacy and trust relationship build. And so this is going to be a use case kind of going through and saying, hey, when I start to get privacy preferences in my channels and start to build that in a customer profile, what does that look like? Because I want to build a trusting relationship with my customer. So this is the use case from the second walk use case from our ebook. And this is a sample use case. We've changed up some of the data sources here. Obviously, some omni-channel data sources probably won't fit in since we give our consent typically through mobile applications, web data, but ultimately we're bringing those types of data in and building it into a profile from Matt. Matt, we've got a lot of information about, right? We have purchase history, product interest. Now we have consent status and consent category. And so when we go through and we create audiences, maybe Matt has gone through and said, hey, necessary cookies, that's okay. Necessary technologies to offer me, and give you back-end analytics of how I'm using your website or using your mobile app, that's okay. But I really don't want you to go through and personalize anything for me. I don't want anything running on, my your personalization tags running. So when I go through in the audience creation, maybe his consent status is opting out, and the consent status category is something like email or personalization. Let's say it's personalization in this one. Maybe I can go through and serve ads. Emails can be served. I can go through and analyze that segment. But since he opted out of personalization, I would go through and suppress that, or vice versa, right? If I looked at my audience opt-out category on email, I'd then maybe suppress my Marketo instance, but be able to send that audience or Matt's profile off to a personalization engine like Optimizely. And then finally, kind of at the tail end of the webinar here, let's talk about the run use case. And this is, I think, where a lot of our customers and prospects have the endpoint that they have in mind when they first purchase a CDP, and it's very doable and reasonable to get here. But again, going back to this crawl, walk, run approach, this is kind of our endpoint where I'm actually building a single view of the customer. I'm actually not only leveraging multiple different data sources, but my outcomes aren't just advertising and personalization and email. My outcomes might be customer support, might be analytics, might be advertising and email, things like that are kind of traditional engagement points. And so I'm really kind of building for multiple different business units a single view of the customer that is impacting multiple different engagement points that are beyond maybe just your traditional customer experience and marketing platforms. So let's look at this one. This is our single view of the customer. A CDP is purpose-built to generate a single view of the customer. And that includes online and offline behavior across the entire life cycle of the data. So you can see here that we're still using the same data sources that we have throughout the whole time. We're looking at mobile data, point of sale data, mobile app data. To get all this data in one place for understanding the complete context, you need two things. The ability, again, to organize our data around a person and a common taxonomy for that data so that the data can be, in the profile, can be understood. And so every business is different. They'll have different taxonomies. Tealium provides a very flexible approach to build out business rules that are, and audiences that are impactful to your business. Not every business will have window shoppers. I don't think healthcare companies will have window shoppers. And so a flexible platform, and you're going to want to build out the ways in which you want to understand your customers. After you've done that, it's only then that you can actually use these profiles to put customers in the right segments for the purposes of engagement or analysis. Only with the data from each of these three channels could you properly place a customer into one of these two groups, right? Where I look at window shoppers and repeat purchasers. If I can understand data from, this is kind of a retail example, but if I can understand web data, point of sale data, mobile app, build those into unified profiles based on unique customer attributes like purchase history, product affinity, favorite store, loyalty level. That's when I'm going to be able to be as efficient as possible with people who have, had repeat purchases and unlikely to purchase again in a little while, where I want to actually go through and engage my window shoppers. That's when I'm able to kind of go through and use across multiple different touch points. So if I look at kind of the bottom of this graph, my engagement endpoints, the suppression of audiences in Facebook, the suppression of audiences in Google advertising, but I still want that for segment analysis in my analytics platform. Right here we have Google Analytics, but maybe you use Tableau, maybe you use Domo, maybe you use any other sort of analytics tool out there that is, kind of rip and replace whatever you've kind of invested in your tech stack. We can certainly work with on-site personalization, things like going through adding to a list in Facebook, recording a record, updating in a point of sale system. So if somebody comes in store, I want to be able to have data about their past purchases, maybe be able to upsell them in the store, your record updated in the CRM, more segment analysis. All of that is kind of across what I think, kind of get to on a single view of a customer, of taking in data from multiple different sources, building out a bunch of unified profiles, understanding and then executing those audiences across multiple different touch points of your business. That is kind of our run. And I think that's all ultimately, when we see customers take a successful CDP journey, it's, again, crawling, getting some easy wins, walking, moving into some more complex use cases, and running, getting to this point where I'm really, I've really got my bearings on a customer data platform now. I've got my bearings on my data that I want to leverage and understand about my customers, and then bearings on how I'm sending and working with that data in the actual execution systems like Facebook, advertising systems, analytics, personalization engines, CRMs. All right, we're rolling towards the end, but we did want to just share here really quickly a quick customer story that I really enjoy about the Utah Jazz. So the Utah Jazz is a great Telium customer. They are an American basketball team in the National Basketball Association. I'm a big NBA fan myself. And so this is a great story that I like to tell of just kind of, hey, here's how a real customer of ours has gone through where they started, and ultimately some of the results that they ended up with after their CDP adoption. So let's start with their story. But before Telium, the Jazz were able to do, I think, what a lot of businesses are able to do, right? They're able to run analytics on their own web properties, but those insights remain siloed. If I didn't have Google Analytics, whatever analytics that I'm running behind my web, if I didn't have the keys or license to that platform, I may not have that understanding of, what little analytics I did. And so what they really looked at was tools and solutions like tab management systems, event-driven cloud delivery systems for API-based data and customer data platforms, so that they could deploy two use cases that ultimately solve some fundamental challenges. First of all, they wanted to be able to use first-party data from their fans' web experiences and influence email marketing and sales outreach. So if you can imagine an NBA basketball team, if I'm a fan and I'm thinking about ticket purchasing, obviously now ticket purchasing looks a lot different. But if I'm, able to understand back to some of those audiences that we went through in our use cases, who are my VIPs, right? Who are my season ticket holders, and what kind of offers, and how do those offers change when I understand who a season ticket holder is? Who are people purchasing single game tickets, and where? If I have somebody often purchasing single game tickets, but way up in the cheap seats, but they do it often, I definitely don't want to come at that person with an offer to either A, buy multiple different, buy kind of a 5 or 10 game package, or B, have that in a level where they're not often buying, right? That's going to be irrelevant for them. It's going to be an email, an ad, whatever that they might have that they're going to shift to the side. And then last but not least, going through and, understanding when those VIPs come in, how can I go through and better engage them? And getting data from third-party sources as well. A lot of the ads and analytics would lead to the Utah Jazz. Sometimes as a ticket purchaser myself, I go and comparison shop a little bit. I might go on to Ticketmaster and see what else is going on. So getting some of those insights as well. So they really started to try and build a customer data foundation to solve some of those problems. And so the second thing outside of that first party data, just understanding their own customers better, their own customer preferences based on their own kind of analytics and digital touch points. That third party data example, they wanted to start to stitch together fan experience data with third party platforms like Ticketmaster to gain a complete picture of the fan experience across their 8 main channels. These changes allowed them to monitor and adjust performance and spend in real time and set the stage for a lot of future use cases. And so prior, it was all kind of siloed, right? Your analysts, your web analytics professionals, maybe your digital marketer had access to the actual data that was running on the web and on mobile touch points. Ultimately, that wasn't informing what the promotions were coming from the Utah Jazz. And so again, you might have a scenario where all people in their database got the same ticket offer, and that's not going to be a high converting experience. And so really they started to try and build back their data foundation to ultimately achieve better customer experience, more personalized offers, higher conversion, greater revenues. And so let's look at, after they did some of this work and went through some of that crawl, walk, run approach, some of the outcomes that they have are really great. And again, this full story is in that chapter 2 of the CDP definitive guide. They saw a 50% cost reduction per CDP campaign. So again, going back to efficiency, marketers and CX professionals, oftentimes the budget comes in a little lower than what you think. And so how do I leverage and make sure that my execution channels are doing what they need to do? I need data, and I need to understand my customers, and I need to be super particular and careful about sending the right offers to the right customers. Utah Jazz, 50% reduction per CDP campaign, really great. 140% increase in click-through rates, 62% increase in return on ad spend, 34% increase in revenue per visitor, and 100K revenue for abandoned cart campaigns. Think about, again, that crawl use case that we just went through. Cart abandonment campaigns are something that almost every single business is running that has a cart. If you can improve that and go through and just make sure, again, that the right people are getting the right offers and not, scaling more one-to-one and personalized interactions, some real good results from the Utah Jazz kind of proving out the value of what that looks like. And so they built their data foundation, obviously built out some customer experience enhancements like upgrading the app experience during the games or revealing cross-sell opportunities across the parent company's multiple websites. And they built onto those use cases to achieve those results. So really great use case from a really awesome customer in the Utah Jazz. All right, last but not least, we are going to kind of close out the webinar. I'm going to pull up to see if we have any questions, but there's obviously a ton of places to go learn more. So we've got some links here that we wanted to share out. Obviously, what we've talked about and what's been kind of the basis of our entire talk here today has been the definitive guide to customer data platforms. That is 72 pages of industry expert and knowledge that we have been able to put together, both with our agency partners at Credera and with internal experts and those who have kind of been very hands-on with customers and deployments. Everything that you need to know to understand CDPs, use cases, getting started, how to build a team around my CDP. That is available for free and ready for download on telium.com. The Utah Jazz story that we mentioned, they spoke at our last user conference, Digital Virtuosity. And so you can go through and hear from Jared Gertz, the kind of our champion and Telium user at the Utah Jazz, and see how they went through their digital transformation process. A really good story. And they talk a little bit about how things have changed. Obviously, the pandemic has stopped fans from coming into arenas. And so he talks a little bit about what that shift looks like on their customer experience strategy. Really interesting. And then last but not least, we just recently released for preparation in the holidays, a 2020 retail readiness. And so if you're a retailer saying, hey, I may already have my campaigns in place for this holiday, but certainly a CDP is on my roadmap and I want to start thinking about the holidays for next year. For a lot of retailers, holidays start in July. Pick this ebook up. It's got some really good practical use cases, and you can kind of learn more on the holiday angle of where CDP use cases fit in as well. So that's everything I have today. I wanted to thank everybody for joining and spending some time and going over some use cases. I hope it was helpful. I hope everybody's walked away with just a better sense of where CDPs can fit and add value when they are actually going through and setting up a CDP for the first time. I'm going to check here really quickly if we have any questions. And it doesn't look like we do, but if you have any questions for us or the team, please reach out. You can reach us at telium.com. We have a Drift chat open, almost always available for us to speak with you, and or send us an email, get in touch with us. We'd love to speak about how CDPs can fit into your specific environment and use cases. And we look forward to seeing you at that time. So thank you again, everybody, for your time, and hope you have a great rest of your evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you might be.